Hello and welcome to the Podquest of Bread. My name is Henry Conley. Tonight I want to talk about being safer. Of course, this has a lot to do with what today is, but I want to discuss it in a different way, a way that most people seem to fail to discuss this day and the real implications of it and what occurred. See, it seems that one thing we never seem to talk about on 9/11 is the massive amount of normalized Islamophobia that followed that day and still continues to this day. In the days and months following 9/11, I witnessed women having their hijabs ripped from their heads. I witnessed women wearing burqas or niqabs receiving literal death glares, being harassed by brave and patriotic Americans. I saw Hindi, Bengali, and Sikh women being harassed by ignorant Americans who couldn't be bothered to learn about their culture, their faiths, or their beliefs. I witnessed Muslim men being harassed in the streets, publicly shunned and treated as terrorists because of their culture and faith. I witnessed Sikh men being treated in equally disgusting ways and the same mistreatment of Hindi and Bengali men. All of this was rationalized and normalized as a rational, emotional reaction to the events of 9/11. The virulent attack on people based on their skin color, culture, or perceived faith was explained away as a natural response to the attacks. The sad part is this still continues today. We rightfully remember every 9/11 the one patrolman from the New York Fire Patrol, the 8 EMTs, the 60 police officers, the 343 brothers from the FDNY, and the 2,753 civilians killed in the attacks. Sadly, 9/11 and never forget, a common phrase used on the eve of this day and throughout this day, are used as a moment of national solidarity and a moment of nationalist-style unity. The phrase never forget is used to convey this message of us versus them. It's a way for us to relive this day forever. 19 years later, we are still saying the phrase never forget. 19 years later, we are reflecting on the pain, the sorrow, the hatred, and the anger that was birthed from that day. This is not a healthy coping mechanism, nor is it a way forward. Far too often, the United States forgets the countless other innocent civilians and people that died due to 9/11. The 31,000 Afghani civilians killed due to the direct conflict in their country. The roughly 208,000 Iraqi civilians killed as a direct response or a result of the war in Iraq. We in America seem to only care about the American casualties that occurred as a direct result of the attacks and the wars. We only seem to care about them and the American civilians who died. Why do we not talk about the countless civilians killed, injured, and displaced by the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Niger, Somalia, all the different places that the war on terror has taken us? Is it because they aren't American? Is it because they look like those that perpetrated the crime? Is it because they are guilty by association based solely on where they live and generally the religion they practice? Do you feel safer now than you did 19 years ago? And that is the question I have. In 19 years, we have watched as we bombed and destroyed a country. Let me rephrase that, multiple countries. We have bombed and destroyed a people who are not responsible for the attacks on 9/11. We have bombed and destroyed families. We have destroyed homes, schools, places of higher education. In Iraq, the median age is 19. The median age of their population is 19. These young folks in Iraq, they've never known a world that was not a part of the U.S. occupation of Iraq. They've never known a world free of U.S. troops on their grounds, U.S. troops controlling curfews, U.S. troops controlling how they live and their government. They've never known a world free of conflict. They've never known a world free of being reminded of something they didn't do. We all too often in America seek to remember this day and relive this day. We don't want to move forward because by remembering and reliving this day, year in and year out, all we are doing is continually justifying the wars created by the military-industrial complex. We are continually justifying the actions we are taking in Iraq, Afghanistan, and countless other countries. We are continually justifying the murder of innocent men, women, and children, the tearing apart of families, and the destruction of their culture and their way of life. Like it or not, I have some sad facts for you guys, but they are cold, hard facts. The reason ISIS grew to the power they grew to in Iraq, Afghanistan, and beyond is because of our continued occupation of their lands. We left young people with no other choice but to seek out a way to drive us out, and that drove them to extremist ideologies. We have held millions of people responsible and fearful of their lives because of the actions of 19 hijackers 19 years ago. I don't want to sit back and remember 9/11 for a 20th year. I don't want to sit back and think about these actions 20 years later. I fear what the 20th anniversary and the 20th anniversary celebration of what occurred will look like. Because today, I was reminded of what it looks like 19 years later, where people have not forgotten. They have not healed. I still walk through the streets and I still go through my own town and I see people judging Muslims. I see people judging people who practice Islam. I see people staring at Hindi and Bengali people. I have heard from friends who are sick about the mistreatment because it is assumed that they're terrorists. The fact that they're brown and Middle Eastern makes them a target of hatred 19 years later. And the big anniversary of 20 years later, I fear what that will look like. It's time to move forward and it's time to heal. It's time to feel love again and respect and compassion for our fellow American and our fellow human. One of the stories I hear people talk about so much when they reflect on those days after 9/11 is they reflect on the national unity of that day. Now, I won't lie. Before I awoke and I started thinking about things a little more critically, I did think that those days were filled with unity and pride. I remember the days after 9/11 when every property was adorned with the American flag, when every car had in its window one of those nice stick-on window flags that everybody rolled their window up into. I remember you couldn't turn one direction without 343 emblazoned or the countless civilians' names or anything reminding us of the national pride of strength that we had in those days. But the problem is, was there actually unity? Was there truly a coming together of this whole nation? I say not. Because when you look at it, in the days after 9/11, a sick man was murdered in his own gas station, all because he wore a turban, and it was assumed that he was a Muslim and an Islamic terrorist. In the days after, as I said, I witnessed Hindi women having their headdresses torn off. I saw women having their hijabs torn off of their heads. On the news and in the news, I saw people glaring at people wearing burqas and judging those around them just because they are Muslim or Islamic or brown or from the Middle East. There was no national unity except for a shared national unity between the white folks in this nation and a shared hatred of those that attacked us. And we took that hatred out on everyone that looked like those people. And we still do it to this day, 19 years later. I don't feel safer. I don't know how anybody could say they feel safer 19 years later. In fact, I think this country and this world are far more dangerous than they have ever been, due to the reaction and the bloodlust of the United States in the days after 9/11, in the weeks after 9/11, the months after 9/11, and even the years after 9/11. This country has a lust for violence and a lust for war. We have a lust for revenge, and we don't care if that revenge is taken out on people that actually perpetrated the crimes or people that just look like them and live in the nations we think that those people came from. In the startup of the podcast, I showed a photo of Baghdad 6 weeks prior to the United States invasion, and then a photo 6 weeks after the U.S. invasion of Baghdad. This nation, in the hopes of defending ourselves, in the guise of defending ourselves, in the guise of promoting freedom and bringing justice and democracy to the world, has torn a country to shreds. We tore Afghanistan to shreds. We're tearing other nations to shreds as we speak, all under the guise of bringing them democracy, bringing them freedom. Yet I see no freedom. The more and more we do this, the more and more they hate us, and the less safe we become. So, what do we do to honor the deaths of all of those people 20 years after 9/11 next year? We ensure that the wars that we wrought out of pure hatred and pure lust for revenge are over. We ensure that we no longer occupy their countries, and we allow them, for the first time in 20 years, the opportunity to rebuild. I don't want to have to do an episode like this next year, because next year, I would hope that our episode on 9/11 is one talking about fundamental change and freedom, justice, liberty, democracy, all coming not only to the Iraqi nation, to the Afghani nation, but to our nation. Because this nation, more than ever, needs healing. The hatred of Muslim people, the hatred of anybody from the Middle East, it is ever prevalent right now. I don't feel safe, not just because of what I fear we are stoking in the Middle East, but because I fear what's happening right here in the United States. What will continue to happen so long as we pretend like these people are our enemy and not our fellow human. With that, stay beautiful, humans.